In the past few years, we have seen a number of vehicle accidents with self-driving automation engaged that have rattled people's confidence in the technology. A vehicle using autopilot ran into a tractor-trailer, a tow truck, and even a barrier between two highways. And one test car caused a tragically fatal accident with a pedestrian in Arizona.
Some of these accidents were investigated by the NTSB. In a non-fatal crash in which a car hit a fire truck on the highway, the NTSB report stated that the probable cause of the rear-end crash was the driver's lack of response to the fire truck due to inattention and over-reliance on the vehicle's advanced driver assistance system. It is interesting to note that in the aftermath of these accidents, it was taken for granted that the human driver would not have made the same mistake had they been paying attention. Indeed, nobody in their right mind would run full speed into a tractor-trailer or into a barrier or hit a pedestrian if they were paying attention.
One of the reasons why self-driving systems made these fatal errors is because they cannot see the way people can see. In this podcast, we will take a closer look at the perceptual practices of people while driving. I'm Eric Winkhuizen. I'm a senior researcher at the Alliance Innovation Lab in Silicon Valley.
And I'm Eric Staten, a PhD candidate at MIT and an intern researcher at the laboratory. At the lab, we have been examining how people look, what they see, and how they deal with visibility problems. When people look, they know what they see, and they see the world in meaningful objects and situations. We see things in people on their way just like we are, or people lingering, or people engaged in the infinitely varied activities that we know that people engage in.
Take this unusual situation I encountered on the busy highway from Baalbek to Beirut in Lebanon. I'm following some cars in the right lane when I notice that they are moving over to go around a car that is stopped or stalled on the road. I then notice that there are two men talking over in the middle of the highway over the concrete barrier blocks, and I conclude that must be the driver. It's an unusual sight to be sure, and also exceedingly dangerous. I mean, he's not only risking that people might run into his car, but the walk to the median must have been very treacherous. His current position isn't exactly safe either, and presumably he must walk back across those two lanes of highway traffic to get back to his car. I'd never seen anything like this before, but when I encounter it, I had no trouble seeing and understanding it.
But an autonomous vehicle's perceptual system is constructed out of meaningless pixels, from which it builds up a representation of objects by means of sophisticated algorithms. But those objects are still quite meaningless. Moreover, each step in the algorithm has uncertainties, and there are false positives, things that are wrongly identified as being something, as well as false negatives, things that are not identified, but actually are something. People don't perceive the world in this way. Under normal circumstances, they are not uncertain about what they see. And in special circumstances, when we are uncertain, such as when we drive in thick fog or at night, we may not be able to see, but we do know why we can't see and can adjust by driving more slowly and by turning on the headlights.
As always, we will construct our argument from the ground up, from actual instances of moments on the road. Our examples of perceptual practices in driving stem from an extensive corpus of international video sources. An experienced London taxi driver whom we recorded for an entire day, recordings of driving experiments we conducted in California, YouTube videos of a driving instructor teaching student drivers in the UK, and our own recorded drives in San Francisco and Lebanon.
So you gotta go after?
Wow.
We will see that driving creates particular perceptual challenges for people, but the people have developed sophisticated ways of dealing with them. Chief among these is that we use understanding of the situation in conjunction with practical reasoning to deal with our perceptual challenges. Our eyes can see very well. They are great sensors, as an engineer might say, but that in and of itself is not sufficient. What makes human perception so powerful is that our eyes can be focused on just those aspects of the environment that are most important to whatever it is that we're trying to do. That is, we choose what to look at And indeed, the very things we see are contingent on how we understand a situational context.
Take this simple example from a drive in San Francisco where some of the roads are iconically steep, making it difficult to see at times. I'm driving up a steep hill, but the road turns sharply right near the top. I direct my gaze to the right as I turn right, demonstrating this simple point. People naturally look where they need to see given the context. The road turns right, so I need to see whether it is clear, so I naturally look right down the street. Looking anywhere else, frankly, would be mad. This is where I need to look. Moments later, I come to an odd intersection with a road that is almost parallel to me, with traffic coming from behind me to my left, and the road I want to enter dropping off so steeply to my right that I cannot see down it. Just note how I turn my head strongly to the left, checking the side mirror, but noticing that it doesn't allow me to see the street. Then turning more strongly to check the blind spot where the traffic may be coming from. And once I've done that, I look down the street to make sure that the road is clear that I want to enter.
So this is a good illustration of how people understand a driving situation, and how this understanding automatically directs them to look in relevant places around them. Note how Eric's perceptual practices are aimed at dealing with what he cannot see. He twists his body so that he can see the traffic from behind him, as anyone coming from that direction is going to be traffic for him. Also important is to check that the road that he's turning into is clear, hence the stretching forward to look down. None of this is particularly skilled on his part, and certainly none of it was conscious. The way people perceive is seemingly the inverse of how autonomous vehicle perception systems work. While autonomous vehicles start from a meaningless array of pixels and build up a representation of the situation from that, people sensing is directed in the other direction by our top-down understanding of the situation, and we use this understanding of the situation to overcome some perceptual limitations. These limitations stem in part from our eyes being in the fronts of our heads, and in part from the environment, where there can be both permanent and temporary obstacles hindering our view. Lastly, understanding our own limitations also allows us to understand how other people on the road may experience limited visibility, and this allows us to respond to those other road users with sensitivity.
As we already indicated, perception and action are closely linked. Consider this clip from a driving instructor who explains how the student should adjust her speed based on whether the limit point is moving away from her or coming towards her.
So if you look ahead now, your limit point is basically the furthest point that you can see. So where we are now, where the road narrows, that point at the little arrow point at the head of it, that's the furthest point you can see. If you're coming up to that and it's getting closer and closer and closer, the speed needs to come off. If it's moving away from you, you can put the speed on. What we want to try and do is to get ourselves into a position when we're approaching that so it's staying the same distance away from us. Then we've got the perfect speed to just carry around the corner.
This is a nice example of how perception and action are tightly coupled when we drive. Drivers can just focus on the limit point in the environment and adjust their speed to keep it visually constant. The limit point allows us to adjust our speed on a curvy country road, and there is nobody around. Of course, most driving situations involve other drivers and require attention to many more things. On many occasions, you can't see the limit point for other reasons. For example, when one is driving into the sun, when it is low in the sky, and especially when the road surface is wet. Under those circumstances, it can be very difficult to see.
In this clip, we see our driver turning a corner into the sun. She tilts her head back to move her eyes into the shadow of the sun visor.
All I can do is slow down, really.
That's it. You must be able to stop in the distance you can see to be clear.
And tells the instructor that she slows her vehicle down because she cannot see as far as she could before. And here, the same driver is dealing with sun glare from the rear.
Your
I can't
observation
see it back
tells
from
me
there.
good. So again, it's limiting it. How can you see out of these ones? Do they work? Do you get a better view from these than that one where the sun is?
Note how in all of these situations, people are completely aware of their inability to see properly and understand the reasons for their impaired vision. A combination of their own bodily limitations and external environmental circumstances. People intuitively know how to alleviate these perceptual problems while at the same time adjusting their speed in order to stay safe.
People can anticipate upcoming visibility problems and take action, for instance, by turning on their headlights before entering a tunnel. Anticipating a lack of visibility requires a self-awareness about your perception and thinking ahead about how the traffic situation might evolve. Take this case from the English driving lessons, in which the student started to go around parked vehicles on her side of the street, but when she encountered oncoming traffic, she ducked between the parked cars.
Oh, I'm scared to go out now.
Well, if you have a look across the top of the wall, you can see whether there's cars coming or not.
Window.
Before she pulls out, she wants to make sure the road is clear, but her view is blocked by the parked cars and the turning road, and she expresses her anxiety about going. So the instructor suggests that she look in the distance over a wall to see if cars are coming down the road. While she cannot see the cars that are close, she does have a way to determine whether there are vehicles coming from further back. So by waiting a little while, she can be sure there are no cars coming and it is safe to go. These perceptual practices to deal with a lack of visibility allow people to see traffic, or in this case, the absence of traffic, in locations where they cannot see directly.
Because the practice of driving requires moving through a constantly changing trafficscape, a driver's vision is often blocked by obstacles around her. But there is a crucial difference between obstacles that permanently block one's vision, such as a hedge or a wall, and temporary obstacles, such as a moving bus or a truck.
When we compare our vision with that of an autonomous vehicle, one of the striking things is how much better people are at categorizing things as obstacles. For instance, for people, it is simple to see the difference between a truck that is moving, and therefore an ephemeral object that will quickly disappear from view, and a moving truck that is unloading and therefore something that forms an obstacle and must be passed. For autonomous vehicles, reliably classifying a car as a car is already a sophisticated computational process. And making the additional determination that a vehicle is double parked is even more difficult. And it is common for autonomous vehicles to get stuck behind a double parked vehicle like this one, unable to see that in this case, the car should not be followed, but gone around.
For people, by contrast, it becomes quickly apparent that this temporarily parked vehicle belonged to the young woman who's just picked up her children. This instantaneous awareness of the situation, immediately classifying this vehicle as not going and these people as not crossing, is another way in which our perceptual practices enable us to understand the world and to make good driving decisions. Note how we have been talking about totally banal perceptual practices of human drivers, practices that we feel confident people are familiar with. But that in and of itself is remarkable. What we see is socially shared. We don't just see the world in a certain way, but we trust that others see the world in that same way. And indeed, we make driving decisions trusting that others see the world in that same way. We first highlighted this in another podcast, but it is worth illustrating again here.
Consider this four-way stop intersection in San Francisco. I arrive after the vehicle from the left, but when the pedestrian crosses and the vehicle on the left does not move, I trust that the driver of that vehicle has also seen the pedestrian and is waiting for him to cross, and that therefore I can go ahead of him. Traffic is replete with situations in which people must count on other road users seeing the world in the same way that they do.
Consider this example of a taxi driver who encounters a vehicle pulling out of a parking garage into a narrow street. He has the right of way. However, he can also tell that the driver of the other vehicle cannot possibly see him. Her vision is blocked by the walls of the garage she's pulling out of. Therefore, the taxi driver honks and the other driver stops. They are both aware of their perceptual systems. One is aware that she cannot see and has no choice but to pull out, while also trusting that others can see that she can't see, and that therefore the honk, which she presumably can hear even if she can't see, will be the logical and appropriate way to communicate, "Watch out." This is yet another example that shows that traffic is often social. When we encounter other road users, we count on them sharing our understanding of the world, and that includes, of course, how we see the world.
As we stated in the beginning, autonomous vehicles perceive the world in a fundamentally different way than people do. Yet, as we have also seen, people rely subconsciously on other road users' ability to perceive the world in the same way as they do. Ultimately, this trust is presupposed yet confirmed by the observable behavior of other road users. Behavior that displays, in part, what they have seen. Whether autonomous vehicles can achieve the same behavior that communicates what the autonomous vehicle has seen to other road users, when it is based on such a fundamentally different perceptual process, remains to be seen.